Hey guys, it's Jesse Lear here, and this is the first interview that we're going to be doing in my interview series, and I'm very excited about this because, as I've shared with you before, you can learn a lot of different things from books, you can learn from seminars, conferences, all these different types of things, but I don't know if you're anything like me, but I learned from watching people and actually doing things. So made friends with Jay quite a while ago, and I'm excited to talk to him today and delve deeper into his story and how he became the entrepreneur that he is. And really excited about this series as a whole because it's going to give you an opportunity to hear other people's stories who were once where you are, looking into entrepreneurship and maybe thinking it was something interesting that you could do to create more freedom in your life. So Jay, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got Matt as usual behind the camera. He might jump in a time or two. He's usually unruly like that. So we're going to jump right into the questions here. But first, Jay, just want to ask you, man, how did you become an entrepreneur? How'd you get into this whole crazy world that we're in?
We'll get into the questions, but let's ask the most loaded one first.
Exactly.
Well, I found entrepreneurship when I was at Ohio State
as
a student. I was undecided on what I wanted to do when I came to Ohio State. My entire extended family are mostly high school educators, but they're in education. So I had like a pretty narrow worldview at the time.
Okay, but teaching was really natural for you all along, and that's something that
the irony is I thought, well, like, okay, teaching is what everybody does.
Right.
I'm not going to do teaching, and of course now, as you've seen, I've kind of circled back and I do a lot of teaching.
Definitely.
But I was lucky in that in my freshman dorm, I shared a common wall with two students who had started businesses in high school. So
nice.
It really opened up my mind because I had ideas, I had app ideas, like everybody had app ideas at the time.
Right.
And they said, hey, you should take this and go to the Entrepreneurship Club and pitch this in their pitch competition to one of my ideas.
At OSU?
At OSU.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what that club was, what a pitch competition was, and that was really my first sort of break into entrepreneurship. Because from that competition, I got to see 6 other students or student teams pitch their ideas.
Right.
And it just blew my mind. I was like, you're telling me that people have the agency and the permission to go and build something on their own?
Right.
Like, I just didn't even know that was a thing.
Right.
So,
and that's actually an interesting thing, because if you're hearing Jay talk right now, you're probably realizing not once so far as he said, oh, I realized it was possible for me to make millions by age 24.
No.
This was about you. This was about you realizing that it was possible for you to build things, to do things differently, to pave your own way, in a sense, right?
Totally. And I will be the first to admit also that through my 4 years in college, I was definitely wooed by what seemed to be like the sexy lifestyle of
course,
building a startup and then, getting to the point where you can bro down.
Right.
And, even all the way through the first company that I did, I quickly realized with that company, this is not... this is not sexy, and this is no joke. So, I'm glad that at the end of the day, I've come around to the realization that is the reality of, this is not, you don't do this to make a ton of money. You do this because you compulsively have to.
Right. The money, if it happens, is sort of like a natural byproduct, right? It's never the goal.
Yeah.
At least for most people, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So you were motivated by the ability to sort of pave your own path, create something of your own, maybe that didn't exist before. And it sounds like you've gone through several different, even since I've known you, you've gone through several different phases of things you've been working on. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about your first experience in a startup and what that was really like having a role? And I think it was after college, right?
Yeah. Well, I had like several internships in college with startups, which were super eye-opening and gave me some of the best mentors that I could ever ask for. But my first real swing of the bat was right out of college. I joined with a partner in Cincinnati, and we built a ticketing startup called Tixers.
Okay.
And he had just gone through, he had won a startup weekend, and really it was just him and an idea still. And he said, I'm going through this accelerator. We have just a little bit of funding. I need someone to come on and help me build this thing out.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew obviously that you were involved with Tixers, but I didn't realize that you were the first person to come on in addition to the original founder.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty
so
cool.
That was amazing.
So you saw it from literally just an idea
to
where it ended up later, which I'm sure you'll share.
Yeah. He was working with an engineer, and he was building out like the very initial version of the page, which was really just a splash page with an email capture.
Right.
But yeah, we saw it from that to all the way through acquisition, which was amazing. But
very hectic too, if I remember right.
Very hectic. It was not at all what I expected.
Okay.
I remember when I decided to go that route because I was considering management consulting. I had interviewed with Deloitte and I had interviewed with McKinsey. At one point I was thinking about investment banking.
Right.
But I remember calling my parents and saying, hey, I think I'm going to join this startup and I'm going to have some equity and I'm going to make this much money. And they're like, what is equity? And I said, well, that means that if it goes well, like maybe I make some extra money.
And if it doesn't, nothing.
If
right?
it doesn't, then nothing, but it's going to be an amazing experience.
Right.
And so...
What did they think?
It took a long time. To their credit, my parents have always been sort of curious. Mm-hmm. It was outside of their knowledge sphere a little bit. And, you know, it's interesting. You have this dynamic with your parents where I want them to be more interested and I want them to know more about what I'm doing.
Right.
But it's hard to build that common understanding and do it from a place of almost vulnerability where you're not feeling like you're teaching your parents because parents don't necessarily want to feel that.
Right.
So for a long time, it was kind of just like hands off. Jay's over here kind of playing house with his career.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a difficult thing.
Was there kind of this feeling with them that you were maybe kind of wasting time a little bit?
Totally. That's what I mean by like playing house. They're like, well, eventually you'll get a real job with benefits.
Okay. So you were still being a college student in their eyes, essentially.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they were extremely supportive of you, but they just kind of that was their perception. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of people who are watching this, especially if you're still living at home or you're in high school or something like that.
They've always been incredibly supportive, albeit not totally understanding. Even when I left my job at Crosschecks 8 months ago, I called them and I said, Mom, Dad, surprising news. I quit my job and I'll probably never take a job again. And they said, what do you mean? What if you get a good offer?
Like, we'll believe anything now, Dan.
But
that's awesome.
Again, they came around, they've been super supportive and they've been even more curious this time around and it's been great. I feel like they have a good understanding of what I'm doing.
So you went through this acquisition with Tixers, and then you mentioned a second ago that you went to Crosschecks, which of course I know, but for the sake of those who are watching, what's that experience like when you go through an acquisition, you own equity in a company, the company sells? What's the day after the money hits your bank account, what are you doing? How do you decide what to do next? And how did you end up making that decision yourself?
Well, it's specifically our deal with Tixers was structured as an earnout. So we had to work for the acquiring company for a year to get our final payout.
That's pretty common.
Pretty common. Yep. But the funny thing is, by the time we got our earnout, I put my 2 weeks notice in literally the next day because it was hard. And acquisitions are super difficult and they don't go as you expect. I think the hardest part is for a lot of entrepreneurs, they get their own personal identity really wrapped up in what they're doing. And so after the exit of one company, they have a lot of trouble sometimes disentangling, okay, how do I reinvent myself? I was this company, how do I go do something else? And I had that for a little bit too.
Okay, so you were the Tixers guy.
I was the Tixers guy, but not only was I the Tixers guy, my co-founder and I basically saw me as a co-founder. He was the founder.
Okay.
We thought of me as a co-founder, but technically wasn't a co-founder. I was the first employee.
So you're used to doing things even together, and then all of a sudden you didn't have that dynamic anymore.
Yeah, it's like, how do I join some other opportunity at this level that I was? And you know, being chief operating officer, whatever that means, still carries a lot of clout when you interact with people. And I had a lot of access to people because of that. And I really struggled with, am I going to voluntarily give up that access by going and being an employee and learning somewhere? Right. Which is what I wanted to do. I knew that entrepreneurship now is no joke, and I wanted to go take a breath. And basically
a little bit of structure for once.
Take some structure, learn from someone else who is doing it at a high level, contribute to a larger team. I was remote that entire time with Tixers, so I wanted to be around people. But I knew that would come with sort of swallowing my pride and putting myself into a different level of the hierarchy that felt lower than where I was. Right.
So you weren't a co-founder at the next place?
No. No. Crosschecks when I joined was over 100 people.
Okay. So you felt like the biggest fish and all of a sudden became one of these smaller fish.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is,
that's an interesting thing.
I had a mentor come and speak to that college entrepreneurship organization one time. Right. And he said something that really stuck with me, for better or for worse. I don't know if I totally buy into this still, but at the time I still was. And he said, when you start something on your own and you can put founder or CEO in your email signature, you're going to get a response from anybody.
Right.
Because they put you into this unnecessary but nonetheless existing hierarchy of you are here, I am here.
Right.
And so I didn't want to lose that spot in people's mind, even if it was mostly smoke and mirrors.
And it turns out it wasn't smoke and mirrors, but as you guys as you guys will learn, if you're very close to an entrepreneur or you've started a business and you've gotten to any level, there's this thing called what is it called? The psychological term for where you think that
Imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, yeah, that is extremely common that I've found with entrepreneurs. You find people who have made world-changing efforts in entrepreneurship. They built these enormous companies, and they still have this thing inside where it feels like people think of them as higher than they've actually earned, and it doesn't seem to ever go away, I think. And I don't know if that's healthy or not healthy or whatever, but it's extremely common.
Totally. I think it does help a little bit with humility, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's totally healthy.
Right. Okay. Well, cool. It's an awesome story. And then you essentially went through this other company. You experienced the employee life. You went, okay, I'm done. I had a taste of entrepreneurship. I came back. I got the team, the structure that I wanted. I found out that it sounds like you really learned how much you valued the freedom that you had at your first startup. So then you took that and, as you said, you resigned from that job and you started something new almost immediately. It was pretty much the same day you quit, right?
Pretty much.
So I know we had scheduled in here to talk about Unreal Collective a little bit later, but let's go ahead and jump into that just a little bit. Maybe give us a brief overview of how you got into it and what it is.
Totally. So, and I will say real quickly, when I did go to CrossChecks, I made a very specific list of my learning objectives. And I had like 6 categories: operations, marketing, sales, leadership, healthcare. And I said, here are 6 large categories I want to learn about, and here are the discrete things I want to learn about below them. And so throughout my 11 months at CrossChecks, I was taking things off. And I got to a point where I saw, okay, I've checked off most of this. The delta here, the stuff that's remaining, I don't think I'm going to have the opportunity to learn here. And so I knew that my time was sort of drawing to an end.
Okay.
And I was being proactive, thinking, I'm not going to just quit without any parachute or any idea of what I'm going to do next.
Right.
Ideally, I want to start spinning something up so I can have a pretty smooth transition because, I was saving because, after you live frugally, it's a lot easier to continue to live frugally.
Right.
And I was saving and I was actively spending time starting to write, starting to concept this idea. I would wake up a couple hours before work, do some of my own stuff, go to the office, come back, work until I went to bed. I did that for a couple of months leading up to me quitting. And when I left, I already knew sort of the concept I wanted to do. I had talked to somebody who had explained to me what a mastermind group was.
Yeah.
And that wasn't totally new to me. I just saw mastermind groups as an interesting way to live. Because for me personally, I found a lot of power when I'd surround myself with other people doing incredible work. And especially when it was work that was different than mine, I learned a ton, and a lot of that stuff I was able to apply the work I was doing in a new and different way.
Okay.
And so he said, a mastermind group is a group of however many people, 5 to 8 people, who meet semi-regularly and help each other get through problems.
Definitely.
And I said, well, I just kind of do that all the time. I had lived in a house with 6 other people who were entrepreneurs and artists and musicians, and that was just my daily life. And I saw the benefit from that. And I said, okay, now I have vocabulary for what that is. Some people see that as a mastermind group. I think I can put together these groups. I think I can curate these groups of people doing their own independent projects and help them succeed faster. And so when I left CrossChecks, step 1 was to do a test of that theory, that assumption. So I found 5 people who were doing 5 very different things on their own. And I said, hey, will you meet with me once a week for 12 weeks? And I'm going to help you go from point A to point B faster on that project.
Okay.
And they said, yeah, that'd be great. So every week for 12 weeks, I got them on a video call and we update each other on each other's progress. So the idea for Unreal Collective was, I'm going to take somebody who is working on a project independently. I'm going to surround them with 4 other people who are doing phenomenal work, plus myself. And every week we're going to check in, give each other updates on our progress, on our challenges, help each other power through roadblocks, and just get a lot further ahead really quickly. It's a little bit like a virtual accelerator.
Right.
And so after I proved out that concept, I made a couple of tweaks to the model. I spun up a website, I started talking to people, and I brought in our first 15 paid members.
Awesome.
I broke them into three groups of 5. And we just finished up a couple weeks ago our 12-week cycle.
That's great. And it sounds like Jay definitely has gotten some huge success stories from this first round, which we'll talk about here briefly in a second. But the interesting thing when I hear you talk about Unreal Collective is especially knowing that detail of your story, how you went to the job and became an employee after building a company and going through acquisition. Your motivation for doing that really was to create yourself with a little bit more structure, a little bit more routine. Maybe accountability takes a little bit of weight off of you, and also the social piece of having team and people around you, collaboration and whatnot. But what's interesting about Unreal Collective is that you're essentially creating those benefits for people who are in that startup environment. Even if it's just a musician working on their own or whatever, you're helping people who are paving their own path.
Right. Sort
of have that structure and that social element that you were missing as an entrepreneur the first time around.
Right.
Yeah, and that's really interesting.
Cross-checks I saw as a total learning opportunity of a new, I wanted to get a different perspective. I saw, okay, we took Tixters here to here. Cross-checks is already past that point. It's going further. I want to see a whole life cycle journey of what starting a company in the Midwest is like.
Yep.
And now with Unreal, you're absolutely right. I like to give people the support system and also the accountability mechanism, and also an expanded network to help them move faster. Because basically I want to do 2 things. My secret motive of Unreal is 2 things. I want to empower people to understand that they have a much higher capacity, much more ability than they realize and they can tap into. I want to show them that they can create and execute on timelines that are really aggressive. Second, I want to show them that any knowledge and skills gap that you have, you can fill by leveraging other people.
Awesome.
So I give them both of those things, and over 3 months, 12 weeks is 3 months, I'm hoping to create that and ingrain that as sort of a habit and sort of a innate understanding. So after the 12 weeks, they can go and just do that on their own. But the community continues on. We have a Slack channel, and they can communicate with people into perpetuity once they get into the community. Yeah. And so that support is always sort of there.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. And we'll talk more in just a few minutes about how you can get involved with Unreal Collective if that's something that you want to do, if you have a goal that you're trying to work toward and think that you might benefit from those sources of accountability and motivation, everything else. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. But first, I want to really get into some of the questions that I have about your opinions on things, because a couple of things I know about you, you're very opinionated about a bunch of different things. You also think through your opinions really well. You're a very social person. You have tons and tons of friends. In fact, we actually met, if I remember right, doing a TED Talk together, right? Yeah, we were both doing TED Talks the same day, and we met then, and then we've done several different things together, including a charity party that I threw several years ago, which it was an amazing event, and
that was awesome.
That was partially due to you. Jay definitely tapped into his network. We basically planned an insanely intricate party in about 5 weeks, and Jay, I think, invited half the people in the ballroom. So I want to really dive into some of the questions that I have about your experience with not only entrepreneurship itself, but aspiring entrepreneurs as a whole, since you know a ton of them. You've been involved with the entrepreneurship organization at OSU. And so I want to get your opinion on, tons of people right now, entrepreneurship is sexy. It's the new celebrity. And a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. Even more people think they want to be entrepreneurs. What does it take to be an entrepreneur, in your opinion? I mean, can anyone be an entrepreneur? Is it a skill that you learn? Is it something that you're wired with from birth? How does that work?
I don't think you're wired with it from birth. I think a giant skill and trait that you need to be an entrepreneur is resiliency. I think that's one of the most telling traits, because it is so difficult. Even in the 3 months that I work with people, I see the ups and downs in that contracted period of time.
Yeah.
And it's you extrapolate that out, and as a career entrepreneur, you're just going ups and downs all the time. So I don't think it's innate, but you have to be resilient. You have to be willing to talk to people and make asks. You have to have some level of social skill where you're going to make uncomfortable asks and create that tension between two people. You have to be willing to hear no, which I think, again, ties back to resiliency.
Right.
And honestly, I think for most people, you also have to get comfortable with selling.
Tell me more about that, because I know that a lot of our followers, a lot of the people who are watching my videos and everything else, that one of the things that I commonly hear is Actually, it has to do with uncomfortable feelings around selling.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's listening right now or watching this and they think, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Sales is super intimidating to me. Is that, tell me about your perspective maybe on sales and how people can get more comfortable with that.
This is one of the biggest things that I wanted to learn when I was at CrossChecks.
Okay.
Was about sales. And what I've come away with between learnings at CrossChecks, doing sales, and learnings from Seth Godin is a guy I follow very closely, and I'm learning a different type of marketing. I see marketing and sales as very, very related. And to me, if you're afraid of selling, then you don't believe in your product. Because selling to me is making an offer.
Definitely.
It's offering something of value to you, to me, to both of us that's worth the price.
Right.
So,
because if I came to you and said, if you give me $10, I'm going to give you $10,000, I don't have to, there's no weirdness around that, right?
Right.
So the only problem would be is if I know that the $10,000 I'm going to give you is fake.
Right.
Then I could have a little trepidation around that, right?
You're offering outsized value for what I'm paying. And you got to think about sales that way a lot of the time. You got to be saying, I am going to give you a product, or I'm going to give you some solution that's going to make your life better tangibly. And I know that is worth more value to you than this cost in dollars. Right. And if you're not comfortable selling, it just means that you don't believe that trade of value to be true. And so I think that's really, really important. But you also have to understand that selling is a little bit of a numbers game. For every 9 no's, you're going to get a yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
definitely.
Some people just like sprint and they say, I can't wait to get 9 no's today because that means I'm going to get a yes.
Yeah. I know people who do that.
And the other thing is, this is the Seth Godin principle. Whatever you're selling, it is for some specific people, and it's specifically not for other people.
Yep.
And so when people tell you no, that's fine. It's not for them. There are people that it's for, and you should sell to them. And if you go out and you're like sharing your message on Facebook or some other platform where it's going to have a wide-reaching audience, and you know that not all those people are fit for your product, that's fine. You're still just making an offer. You're not begging and saying, here, please give me your money for this thing. You're saying, I have this thing, it's available, and this is what the cost is, and it's going to provide this value to you. And if that value exchange is worth it, then let's talk.
Definitely.
And for the people that it is specifically for, they'll say, yeah, that's worth it for me. Let's talk.
Yeah, I love that definition. I think for a lot of people, they connect even a singular no with failure, and that on some level is what a lot of us are afraid of. So offering something and hearing a no sometimes feels like rejection, which feels like failure, and that's a big deal to a lot of people. But I think what I try to share with people all the time is, failure is something that very successful people generally don't fear, at least on the micro level. And so maybe what would be cool is if you could share with us an example of something you failed at doing. Have you ever failed at anything?
I fail all the time.
Okay, I do too. So I was hoping you could say the same.
I think the sign of someone who's comfortable with failure is the person who will instantly say, I fail all the time.
Right, exactly. So tell us about one that maybe is even harder than others to talk about, or something that you're particularly not happy that happened.
Yeah, I think one of the most hallmark failures that I had was when I was still in college, and I had joined an organization. It was a satirical newspaper organization, and I joined because I liked to write, and I really believed in the people who were leading that, and I had a lot of fun that first year at the paper. Then the next year, the leadership was leaving, and I kind of got thrust into a leadership position with that newspaper. We never printed a single issue. We never distributed a single issue. We went an entire year where that paper did not actually hit the stands, and then it no longer exists. So that's a huge failure I think about all the time. But I had a cousin of mine who gave me this amazing definition of failure, which was just, failure is that the intended or assumed result was not achieved. And so many times, just because the intended or assumed result was not achieved does not mean that there was not a still valuable and maybe even more valuable result that was achieved, which often just comes in the form of learning.
Right, just not the one you were maybe shooting for.
Right.
But
sometimes
a valuable one nonetheless.
Sometimes you're going down a path and you think it's going to go this way, and it doesn't go this way, and you say, thank goodness that it didn't go that way because I found this way, and if I would have kept going down that path, bad news.
Definitely.
So, I think failure is a very good thing. Some of them hurt more than others. Some of them are harder to bounce back from, harder than others. But, honestly, getting told no, you just get, the best way to get over that is just hear it a lot.
I know.
And continue to get told no.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed about the entrepreneurship scene right now is that there seems to be a lot more talk about these sorts of topics than about the technical or methodical elements of it. There are a lot of people that are really focused on motivation right now, and they're just saying, go, 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 hustle, 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 you know, get out there, fail, you know, try, work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And one of those people is Gary Vaynerchuk, who I know you have some interesting feelings on. So I wanted to, I know he's going to kill me for this, but I wanted to bring up Gary Vaynerchuk and just hear more about your opinions on him and just the entrepreneurship scene as a whole, particularly on social media right now. Where do you think that whole scene is, and how do you feel like Gary V contributes to that or does not?
I have an ambivalent relationship to this topic because in a lot of ways, you know, I write every day and I share with people, and I'm one of these people. So, you know, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs who talk about becoming a self-made entrepreneur by talking about becoming a self-made entrepreneur. And that kind of stuff bothers me. Entrepreneurship is interesting as an industry because for a long time before the internet, people were just doing it because they were like compulsively doing so. They saw a problem, they filled the problem, and now they're running their own business.
Right.
When the internet came around, it allowed entrepreneurs to find each other and create this community, which also created this perception of this amazing lifestyle.
Right.
So people are out there trying to get that lifestyle. So many people want the lifestyle that they perceive entrepreneurs have, and that's why they get into entrepreneurship. And so there's a ton of people who piggyback off of that and say like, yeah, you can have this lifestyle, here's how you get that lifestyle.
Right.
And so many of them just go about it from this like motivational, I'm gonna get in your face and tell you to hustle type of way, like Gary V. And it doesn't give a whole lot of substance. And the hard thing is our minds, when they feel proximity to success, it actually releases the same chemicals as achievement itself.
Interesting.
And so we can go out there and find unlimited content and consume it and feel the same way as if we were doing it ourselves. I think that happens a lot with Gary Vee's viewers. Is he gets super hyped and he talks about success and talks about hustling, and that feels physiologically as good as doing it ourselves.
Which means it's entertainment, essentially, not essentially teaching.
Yes.
Because that's why we watch TV, right?
Yes.
Because it makes us feel like we're in this situation, like where we're having fun or experiencing the adrenaline rush of being in this action movie or whatever. That's why we do that. So.
Totally.
So what you're saying is that people like Gary Vee have more entertainment value than actual value in terms of helping you learn how to be an entrepreneur.
And I don't want to hate too hard. I do have strong opinions. Strong opinions loosely held. That's a Mark Andreessen thing. But you know, I write every day, so I understand how hard it is to create good content on a daily basis. It's crazy hard. And he's doing like high production value videos every day that are like 30 minutes a piece. That's ridiculous. So I know it'd be hard to continue to pack that with actionable, amazing advice all the time. My thought is though, is if you need this motivation to go and do your work every day from a guy like yelling at you, you're probably doing the wrong work. But you know, I think a lot of people just also see people that they aspire towards, and they're like, I'm projecting my own future desires of success on what I see you having. Right. And I think he feeds a lot of that too, and a lot of people feed a lot of that. You know, it's people want to see figures and aspire towards them. That's why a lot of coaches don't necessarily call themselves coaches. A lot of people who do coaching call themselves entrepreneurs, authors, whatever. Because people don't want to say like, I need coaching help. They want to say, I want to be like you. Teach me to be like you. And they try to do that by watching. But I think there are a lot of people out there who offer incredible, ridiculous value and resources that are very helpful, not just from a tactical standpoint, but from a strategic standpoint and how to think about things differently. That's immensely valuable, and to me, more valuable than just saying, hustle, work 18 hours a day because you're young.
Now, the interesting thing too, though, that I've noticed about this is that it's easy for people like you and me to be critical of people who are teaching hustle, hustle, hustle. And I've bashed the whole hustle culture a little bit myself. But one thing that I remind myself of every once in a while is that there are a lot of people in the world who, to go get gas and, you know, go grab a shirt, from the mall and send 2 emails is a highly productive day. And so I think for you and me, we're used to working 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Saturday mornings, we're sending emails while we're at stoplights. We never stop. Hustle is the way we do things. I think for somebody to tell us to hustle even harder kind of grinds on us a little bit, because we've gone that far with hustle enough to learn that it's not about how hard you're running, it's about where you're running and how you're running and those types of things. So I think people like Gary Vee can be very helpful to people who maybe need to see what it looks like to actually do a good job at batching, do a good job at actually, getting the full value out of a day and things like that. But there's definitely, I always say you got to value your purpose above your pace. And I think that's actually something Matt and I have talked about several times lately. It seems like Gary Vee is kind of realizing that a little bit, shifting in that direction where he's reminding people, hey, there's more to life than work, all this different stuff. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you about him because I knew that there was some feelings there, and we share them to some extent, definitely, because life is about more than hustle. We hustle, for something else. The work is a means to an end. We want freedom, we want to experience life to its fullest or whatever, and I think it's super useful to be cognizant of that as you go along. So thanks for sharing that with me. I know that's something that you've been recently talking about a lot, but we talked about the aspect of failure in entrepreneurship. What's an achievement that you're most proud of?
Oh man, honestly, this is maybe just recency bias coming out. When I started Unreal Collective 7 months ago, about 4 months later, I wrote myself my first check.
Okay.
That was amazing. To say, like, I created this business, it created value, I took my own cut for that, and it's a self-sustaining, profitable business. That's amazing. Obviously, the Tixters acquisition is, like, big. And that's been amazing for the narrative.
Right.
Amazing way to, like, start my entrepreneurial career.
Right.
But a lot of that, I had a ton of help with that, and Alex really paved the way for a lot of that. Unreal felt a lot more like my baby, a lot more like my volition.
Definitely.
And so that really felt great. I even look back though I had this little rinky-dink college marketplace when I was in college. It was like a exclusive Craigslist for Ohio State students. And I look back, Facebook says like on this day, and it gives you your memories, and it's showing stuff that I was posting to like launch that business. And I'm like blown away by how like sound some of the marketing and product management techniques I was using were. And I've
done it before too. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I was like,
something you wrote at like 20.
Yeah, it's like
how did I know that?
I was doing so well then. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing now? Like I was hustling so hard. I was posting. I spent like 30 minutes every day in Facebook groups, like saying, hey, you should check out this website, which is like incredible. But it's like, I'm glad you asked that, because it's really easy to discount accomplishments that you've made.
Very much so.
And so, yeah, sometimes it slips away. And actually, that's why I love that Facebook feature, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. And we do tend to pay more attention to our own. We compare sort of our own backstage to other people's red carpet.
Right.
And so it is good to, we've talked about gratitude journals, I think, and stuff like that in the past, where you, I know for a month I led this challenge where every day you list 10 unique things that you haven't listed any day before for 30 days that you're grateful for. And it really makes a huge difference because it shifts your mindset. The failures are more dramatic. And so 9 successes and 1 failure, we tend to sit in bed at night and stare at the ceiling and think about the 1 failure when we've had the 9 successes. So doing something like the gratitude journal, or just, in conversations, even having friends who can banter with you and talk with you and remind you of the achievements that you've had, and you can talk about them together. It's always a great thing. Those are motivating when you think about them,
Totally.
It's a really cool thing.
I actually baked that into, and you've probably seen this, I baked that into my daily emails. Is at the bottom of every email I say, yesterday was, and I have like this common scale of like bad,
great,
poor,
good.
average, good, great, amazing. And then I have like a win for the day. And I've been keeping track of that in a spreadsheet, so I can go back and like look months on end. Here is like the level of, because when you get to the end of the day and you're saying, am I going to say that I had a bad day today? I didn't have a bad day today. And you always focus on, here was a win that I had.
Definitely.
Amazing.
It's really, really cool.
It was great.
I love it. I love it. And honestly, I would love to see that data too, because and I'm sure you've done this. Jay's a very data-oriented person. I would be looking at the data going, okay, I want to match this up with what I ate on these days.
Totally. You can match that up with like your
how
steps.
Everything is affected, by your diet, exercise, all that.
Here's the other tip though. So I write usually the night before.
Yeah.
And so I reflectively say, yes, today was this, and here was a win. lately I've been flipping my schedule to write first thing in the morning. And so I'm predicting my day and predicting the win, which is like actually helping me get more done and have better days.
That's very, very interesting. So you're sort of calling it in advance, which puts you in the mindset.
Yes. Because it's
really interesting.
If I do that and I say, I'm going to have a great day today, I'm going to get this thing done,
right.
and I put that and I schedule it for the next morning, I know that if I accomplish that, I don't have to go in and edit that email.
I love it. I love it. So I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit because we're a little short on time, but one question that I really want to ask that I'm sure everybody would enjoy hearing is, if you lost everything right now, your entire savings account was empty, all income was lost, your business was, it dissolved somehow or whatever, and you were left with nothing in terms of career, what would you do? How would you start again? And what would be your plan to rebuild?
Yeah, very good question. Well, I think one thing I do very early is do sort of an inventory of my assets. And even though I don't have, probably money, I think that's kind of what you're saying when you lost everything. You don't have money, you don't have savings.
You don't have a job, you don't have...
I would still have some sort of marketable skills, I have knowledge, I'd probably still have relationships. And so I do an inventory of what I do have in this imaginary scenario. And then I would say, okay, how do I leverage these assets to solve a need from somebody and sort of productize an offering, whether that's a service offering or something else.
Okay.
And so if I can immediately go and start selling some of my services, whether it's knowledge-based consulting on marketing or on community building, or whether it's probably don't have a lot of time to build up a physical asset like a course or whatever, but you could go and you could sort of monetize your skills and your knowledge for people who have that problem. One thing that I found recently, I had like a little bit of a cash flow quandary. And so for a couple weeks, my focus was on, okay, I got to make this much money to cover this gap before this time.
Yeah.
And what I did was I literally just baked into my response. You realize all the time people are saying, how are you? Jesse, great to see you. How are you? How are things? What's new? I just baked into my response for that. Things are great. This is going really well. I'm really excited about this. Right now, I'm trying to solve this cash flow issue. Like, I'm trying to get some client work just to cover this gap. People immediately go into problem-solving mode because they care about you. People inherently want to solve problems. And they say, how can I help Jay solve that problem of cash flow? Or how can I help Jay find client work?
Yeah.
And so I, within literally a week, had closed that gap just on conversations I had with people by being very vulnerable and announcing, this is a problem I'm trying to solve.
Definitely.
People basically solved that problem for me.
I love it.
And so I would take a very similar approach with my network if I lost everything and go to them and say, this is what's going on. I always lead like the end of the conversation by saying, hey, how can I help you out? Because A, I genuinely want to.
Right.
B, that more times than not will lead to them saying, oh, well, how can I help you? And I'll say something like, no pressure, but this is the problem I'm trying to solve. So if you know anybody that I could talk to about that,
definitely,
let's do that.
Awesome.
So I think that applies.
Yeah, it sounds like just the really being transparent with people, which, by the way, does take courage. If you're in a situation where you're trying to get somewhere that you're not, you're trying to create something you haven't created yet. A lot of times it comes down to, from what I'm hearing from you and what I've seen from others, is just being transparent about where you are, having both feet on the ground, and being willing to tell people where you're trying to go. And a lot of times it seems like people care a little bit more than a lot of people assume they would.
Totally. And that by being courageous in that way and being generous in that way, you are displaying your own trust in that person, which is going to beget trust from that person and create a very strong, mutually beneficial relationship.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, awesome. We got to wrap up here, but before we go, how can someone get involved at the Unreal Collective? Again, amazing way if you've got any kind of goal that you're working toward independently. Unreal Collective is a very cool, very unusual way of making that happen and sort of getting that structure and that social factor to go with your journey to get where you want to get, and maybe you do it in a much shorter period of time as well, because I believe it's always a 90-day period, right?
Totally.
The 3 months.
Yeah. So
how would they get involved?
Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah.
Next cycle begins in January. So if you go to unrealcollective.com, you can see what past alumni have worked on. You can see their testimonials, and you can add yourself to the wait list if it's still waitlisted, or you can apply there. It is an application process just because we have limited space and we're very proud of the community and want to protect, just the cohesion that exists there and the culture that exists there. So unrealcollective.com for that. You can also check out my email list or anything else I'm working on at jayclouse.com. That'll also link to Unreal if you want to go sort of back and forth that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jay Clouse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right.